Aiboan, Vanakkam, Assalamu alaikum, and a very good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where in this beautiful globe you're joining us from today. Welcome to episode 4 of this limited series, and be inspired through the pandemic-resistant resilience of the corporate leaders who we are privileged to host this evening. Life in general is challenging, and all of us go through ups and downs, some valleys being deeper than the others. Add to this the uncertainty of life and livelihood that this ravaging pandemic has made a reality. And if anything, it's surprising if we don't all feel a little or even a lot discouraged sometimes. The Be Inspired series is our contribution to you, to greater society in general, and even to ourselves, to be encouraged, to be motivated, and to be inspired. Sharing their stories, learnings, and strategies for pandemic resilient corporate success in conversation with AmCham Sri Lanka President Emeritus Prasanta Jayamaha this evening are Mr. Dilhan C. Fernando, CEO of Dilma Tea. Dilma founder Merrill J. Fernando named his tea after his sons, Dilhan and Malik, both of whom have joined their father in this mission to bring quality back to tea with ethic and integrity. The younger of the two sons, Dilhan C. Fernando, is the CEO of Dilma Tea. His efforts have focused on bringing tea to a new generation with innovations like tea gastronomy, tea lounges, and by enhancing knowledge in tea through the Dilma School of Tea. Dilhan also nurtures his father's pledge to make business a matter of human service through the work of the MJF Charitable Foundation and Dilma Conservation. Dilhan currently chairs the Biodiversity Sri Lanka platform, which was pioneered by Dilma Conservation, together with the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce and IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Dilhan is also the chairman of the United Nations Global Compact in Sri Lanka, a corporate sustainability initiative by the UN. Dr. Maheshwar Ranasoma is the CEO of Global Rubber Industries. He holds a PhD from the University of Cambridge, UK, and an MBA from the University of Wales, and a bachelor's from the University of Peradeniya. He has many years' experience in corporate executive leadership, having served on the board of Haley's PLC and was the managing director of Dipped Products prior to joining GRI. Dr. Ranasoma also served as country chairman of Shell Companies in Sri Lanka. He counts several years of experience in research and development and teaching as a senior lecturer in coastal engineering at the Open University of Sri Lanka. Mr. Timothy O'Reilly. Tim O'Reilly is the managing director and co-owner of Taproben Seafood Group. Tim has lived and worked throughout South and Southeast Asia for 25 years. He started his career working for an American multinational seafood company. And during this time, Tim's primary focus was on business development and operations. 14 years ago, Tim started his own company, Sandy Bay Seafood in South India. And at the end of the Sri Lankan Civil War in 2009, he and his partners began their Sri Lankan operations. Taproben is Sri Lanka's largest and most fully integrated seafood company, and its commitment is not just about doing business in Sri Lanka, but bringing employment and income to some of the most marginalized communities within the country. Facilitating and moderating this conversation with some thought-provoking and insightful questions this evening is AmCham Sri Lanka President Emeritus Prasanta Jayamaha, an entrepreneur and investor who counts over 15 years of leadership experience in a broad array of industries, including software services, leisure, real estate development, and construction. He just concluded serving his second term as president of AmCham Sri Lanka, and is passionate about developing and growing trade and investment between the US and Sri Lanka. I call him a trade and investment evangelist. Mr. Jayamaha, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rai. Appreciate the lovely introduction. Good evening and welcome to the audience and the distinguished panelists for this evening's AmCham Be Inspired series. Our focus on this ongoing series is to meet, discuss, and better understand the industries that shape and dictate the future of Sri Lanka. We are also interested to understand how these businesses managed to overcome the pandemic. Whilst most others just wanted to survive, these businesses focused on making the best use of the opportunities. And learning and understanding what made this possible is what makes this series very exciting for me and hopefully for you. As Rai mentioned, our topic in focus today is an inspiring one, showcasing the resilience, performance, and impact of the large export sector in Sri Lanka, which are namely the value-added tea, value-added rubber, and seafood exports. We're going to deep dive on how these industries navigated the COVID-19 challenges as well. As such, we are privileged to have 3 industry leaders from these sectors on the panel today. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us this evening. we move to our first round of questions. I would like to invite each speaker to share a quick overview of their respective industry and organizational performance over the previous 18 months. Let's start with you, Dilan. Dilan, would you mind giving an introduction or a brief overview of the tea industry and Dilma over the previous 18 months, please?
Gladly, of course, it's been unprecedented for us. We have never confronted anything quite like this before. But, tea is a product that has amazing resilience because not least because of the fact that amidst the many benefits, the human health benefits from the antioxidant goodness in tea is its immunity boosting effect. So yes, that was a glimmer of hope, but the rest of it was significantly challenging. So if you look at some of the issues we confronted, it was an evolving situation connected with logistics. That's something that we are facing particularly now. But looking at the initial part, say the first half of the crisis, the challenges were relatively easily overcome because logistics were not a key issue and demand was there in the market. And whilst there was lockdown, there was, I speak globally, but of course, it happened in Sri Lanka as well. The retail sector was amazingly adaptable. So of course, hospitality suffered. So yes, I would say that a significant portion of our business, at least our customer base, wasn't able to continue to consume tea. But what is really amazing is the adaptability, the changes that have been implemented, where hospitality sector has adapted to having some element of retail and so on. But the category in general has tremendous potential because what the crisis has sensitized them to, the consumers, is to the importance of health and wellness, of ethical consumerism, and to a significant extent also with this greater sensitivity to bacteria, to viruses and so on, also to human health and safety, and of course, indirectly also premiumization. So I think my time's up, so I'll hand back.
But thank you, Dilan. Interesting insight into that. How has Dilma fared over the last 18 months? Have you seen the upside? Is the company maintaining its margins and revenues? Or
we have, and it has been by being as reactive as possible or responsive, and probably trying to be proactive in looking at e-commerce infrastructure, looking at how we target the consumer. Because a lot of the changes that we are seeing today, I'm sure the others on the panel will agree, they're not going to go away. There is no return to normal because it is normal that brought us to this point. So we need to understand that and embrace the new normal and embrace the challenges that come with it. So yes, we've revamped our e-commerce infrastructure. We've looked at how we communicate and how we do business generally in order to adapt.
Interesting. Thank you, Dilan. I'll next move to Dr. Mahesha. Dr. Mahesha, how has the rubber industry and particularly GRI faced this, over the pandemic?
Yeah, as we know, the rubber industry plays a very important role in the Sri Lankan economy. It used to, pre-pandemic period 2018-2019, it used to earn export revenues to the tune of around 900 million. That's about 8% of the total export revenue. So it's a significant sector in the third largest export earner for Sri Lanka. During the pandemic period, particularly 2020, the 900 million levels of revenue dropped to about 800 million. But when you look at how we are performing right now in the 2021, 8 months, there is clear rebounding, and then we can see we have done as an industry around $700 million in the 8 months. So that is tracking to around a billion, which is $1 billion, which is actually better than the pre-COVID situation. Now that's the overall industry from a rubber export point of view, rubber product export point of view. Inside that, if you look at the tire segment revenues contribute around 60% of the total rubber sector revenues that we bring in. So that's one of the largest inside the rubber sector. Even during the period that is 2020, the onset of the pandemic and crisis hit in Sri Lanka, when the overall revenues of the sector dropped to 800 million, the contribution of the tire sector remained pretty stable. It actually, as a proportion, rose to 70%, whereas on the average, it stays around 55 to 60%. So the tire industry as a whole has performed steadily through this period, and we see it's also slowly growing. Now, as a company, when we look at GRI, our own company, we were able to leverage our pre-preparedness. We didn't expect this crisis to come, but we had done our basic foundational items to have our global marketing structures in place, our marketing assets in place, our global sales force in place, and recruiting customers. This played very well because we had the readiness without knowing that a pandemic is coming up. We were able to leverage that situation, that foundation, very effectively during the period. Plus, of course, we had to very proactively be responsive and agile to adapt responses to the immediate problems in terms of making sure our business continuity is intact. So we had a lot of risk-based management, risk-based mitigation, anticipating what could go wrong, and had developed these business development plans to be able to operate through the period. And finally, it was also good that as a company, we had practiced continuously staying close to our customers. And this paid off very well because in this situation, not only us as a country, Sri Lanka, but our customers were also very worried. They were not knowing whether the supply chain that is bringing product to them was stable or was it going to be volatile, and what is happening to their business as a result. And since we were very close to the customers, our operating norms were making sure that the customers get their products and they had a reliable party to deal with. So that took the worry away, and putting all this together, we actually were able to record the 25% growth in the on a year-on-year basis during the pandemic year. So I think that's pretty positive for us. So overall, industry-wise, it's shown the resilience. Tire sector has been very steady from Sri Lanka export point of view. And GRI as a company, we have also battled our way through and performed fairly well in this period.
Fantastic, Dr. Maheswar. Thank you for sharing that, and congratulations. So it's always good to see companies that can pivot and get things done along the way. You mentioned risk-based management. I mean, you reviewed obviously your risk exposure and then did some mitigations. Was that pre-COVID or was it during COVID? I was just curious, whether you're already walking into the pandemic ready for something.
Yeah, actually, say when things were hotting up in China in 2019, November, December period, we were looking at how it could impact our supply chain as to begin with, because we do have to rely on global supply chains for our production inputs. So at that point, and when we were also monitoring how this situation was getting worse, and then when we were seeing the initial lockdowns in China, we were already getting ready that this could go out of hand in a risk-based assessment. So our initial attempts were, how do we make sure we have a secure supply chain for our raw material so that we can operate without a problem. We didn't initially anticipate the problem to hit badly Sri Lanka in a short period of time, but we saw what's happening, and then that was giving us certain signals for us to be able to look forward, look beyond the curve, what could go wrong, and then put in place. So before the problem hit Sri Lanka, we were already looking at various possible risks, because we could also see, now we as a company operate in 50 countries worldwide, and then we could see some of our customer bases getting impacted. So those made us think ahead to be prepared, how to support them and what we need to do in case this problem comes over. So that's what I meant by looking at risk-based management. What could be the risk and what could be the practices we need to put into place in order to be able to continue our supply and then continue to grow our business.
Fantastic. Thank you. Over to you, Tim. Would you mind giving an introduction to Taproban Seafood, and also how has your industry and organization fared during the pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. Just firstly, I just to sort of summarise where we are. Look, obviously, the pandemic is without a doubt the greatest worldwide crisis any of us have experienced, and for the listeners out there today that have lost loved ones and are still struggling, obviously, you have our deepest sympathies and wishes that things will get better. I think we should probably, if you even listen to the gentleman before me, I think we shouldn't kid ourselves and think that the pandemic affected all of us the same. It certainly didn't do that. And I think for business, it's been a tale of two stories. You know, some industries accelerated, like online. I read an article that the online, within the first 8 months of the pandemic, grew as much as it had in 11 years. You know, and in contrast, the virus was absolutely brutal to industries which required people to sit shoulder to shoulder, like restaurants, cinemas, and airlines. So and I think, again, I think we're going to see some industries and some businesses might not bounce back from this. I think the seafood industry was very much similar. You know, people that were in food service, in retail and restaurants, you know, basically that just fell off a cliff. And the companies that were into retail, they saw an enormous amount of growth. You know, from tin tuna to items like that, they're at record sales. So for a company like Taprobane, we had been diverse. We were in both spaces. So once restaurants and orders, and similar to what the doctor had mentioned, we started seeing signs coming out of China early. And then we were looking and talking to, I mean, a lot of our buyers are pretty savvy, and they were saying, look, this is going to happen. So we started to look at moving more of our product to retail, which went really, really well. And also probably for our company, again, being diversified and being in both spaces. The Sri Lankan seafood, somehow the sector, it just somehow found its feet. You know, it's quite amazing, right in the middle when Italy had COVID cases and thousands of people being affected and dying daily, Sri Lankan tuna was still arriving a couple of times a week. And I found that just completely astonishing. Also for Taprobane, we had pioneered a venomized shrimp pilot project in 2019. And in 2020, I think, again, pressure, the government allowed that venomite to go into all areas of Sri Lanka. Just for the listeners, venomite is a high-performance shrimp animal that performs very well in these type of conditions. So again, when I look at our company and the sector, overall performance was good considering.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Tim. And good to hear. Nice to hear that Sri Lanka, in the seafood sector, kept bouncing back. Yeah. Moving on to our next round of questions, we hope to focus a bit on the specifics on each company and especially how you overcame or mitigated the impact of the pandemic. I'll start with Dr. Mahesha. Dr. Mahesha, could you enlighten us the challenges and the impact on the tire export industry faced because of the pandemic? And as you know, personal mobility rates had been an all-time low. Basically, personal travel was low, but industrial travel or sectoral travel had been very busy. What sort of effect did this have on GRI, and how did GRI overcome it?
Yeah, globally speaking, the tire industry is dominated by what we call the on-the-road transportation. This is passenger car tires, truck tires, buses, and the like. That segment obviously got heavily impacted. There were job losses, factory closures in the manufacturing sector serving that industry. That's the dominant part of the tire industry. Now, when it comes to GRI, we had carved out the market space, a niche market space to operate. So we were not focusing on the on-the-road segment, but we were focusing, developing our products, growing our business into the what we call the specialty tire business, that is off the road. So our focus was to grow a niche market space in terms of agriculture tires or farm tires, construction machinery related tires, and material handling tires, for example, forklift tires. So as a result, that impact that the tire industry globally suffered, with the pandemic and the mobility restrictions, we kind of were insulated to a large extent. The agriculture industry worldwide was very resilient to the situation. It was an essential item for people's livelihood at that stage. So since we were focusing on that niche market space, it was like we were at the right place at the right time to be able to pivot and make use of that opportunity and continue to grow in that market space and continue to contribute to our customers' growth as well. But it was important that we had to manage our business. So we had clear 3 goals. One, to take the worry away from our customers and be a reliable partner. Because customers obviously started worrying, okay, here it is getting impacted. Will the manufacturing get impacted and will we lose our product supply, and should they diversify their sources and so on. So we wanted to stay very close to our customers, which we have been doing, but we wanted to increase that engagement to assure them that we are a reliable partner, take that worry away, number one. Second goal was to make sure, we defined it as a goal that we will have 0 operational shutdowns during this period, which means we had to look at how do we manage that goal. A number of things had to be done. We had to define what would be our new norms of operations very early as the lockdowns came in, and we were looking at a more reactive phase, how to manage it. But we had one goal in mind, the second goal, that is have 0 shutdown days in our operations, because if we cannot meet that, then we cannot satisfy the promise to the customer that we are a reliable partner. And the third goal was, since we have been looking at how do we grow as a company, how do we incorporate agility into our business, how to have a strong foundation to grow, there was already transformation happening. So the third goal for us was use this difficult situation, the crisis, the pandemic, as a burning platform to accelerate our transformation. A transformation into a resilient team of people. So organizational resilience, transformation into a very agile business, agility, and also a result-driven culture. So we were very focused, and we could use this situation to accelerate that transformation in the organization as well. So all in all, this helped us to survive through the crisis, serve our customers, and grow our business.
The fact that you said no shutdown in an operation and made a promise to basically your customer saying that we are going to be a reliable partner, at least an internal promise, that's what you call a brilliant corporate bond, because I guess supply chain worries was the biggest issue for most businesses around the world.
Precisely. So clearly that when we did that promise, we had to live up to the commitment.
Yes.
So then we had to figure out how to do it.
And did you manage to do that?
Yes, we did. We didn't a single operational shutdown day throughout up to now.
Not one, huh? Amazing.
Not a single.
This separates the men from the boys, as they say. So well done.
Thank you.
Tim, talking about global, food security is a discussion point across the world, especially with the lockdown. There was scares across locally and globally about food security because of supply. And you're in an industry where timely logistics is a key part of your supply chain. You've got perishable items, it's harvested, some are fresh, maybe obviously canned is not a problem, but and logistics was under attack. There was lockdowns, mobility was an issue. So what strategies did Taproban implement to overcome these obstacles? How did you get it to customer on time? Did you have any tricks up your sleeve that made this possible?
Yeah, I look right at the beginning of the pandemic. It obviously was really confusing for everyone, and obviously trying to move between. We're buying from northern province to eastern province right across. So moving it from province to province was challenging. But the government deemed seafood as an essential service. So once we got all the permits and we got everyone registered, we were able to move product and people from A to B. But we've got nearly 2,000 direct employees with 15 factories, so it was just a daily challenge to move people and products safely. On top of that, one of the things that we're going to mention as right at the outset, my partner and our senior managers, we were really concerned that Colombo itself was going to run out of food once everything had been stopped. So the first time in 10 years, we decided to sell into the local market or move seafood into the local market. And that was done purely as initial as a social service. I remember Dylan and I were driving when everything was locked down, we were doing deliveries because we felt that the situation was at a crisis level. And since then, our local business has become quite good. And, and that's another positive to come out of it. But, logistics, we talked about a little bit at the beginning. Internally, it kind of sorted out, but obviously moving things through logistics to countries at the moment is an absolute nightmare. And I'm lucky I have a talented team of people who somehow find containers and somehow find vessels and somehow are able to get product out of the country. On top of these type of problems, we also had the COVID outbreak at the Colombo fish market, and that caused a lot more panic for our sector. And then just to kind of, the cream on top of the cake, we had the Express Pearl vessel, which became an environmental catastrophe. So again, that wasn't just a problem here locally. That caused a lot of problems with our international buyers. Again, a bit of misinformation about what actually happened. And, so we had to work really hard to inform not just our domestic markets, but also our international markets that, product to Sri Lanka was safe and the product that they would receive, was within their specifications. But a complete daily challenge. Somehow we made it. I would say that a lot of us have managed through crisis, and I think we probably all thought we could handle it, but I think, to be honest, we probably all fell short. There are definitely days where, you're pulling your hair out. But, one of the words, I've lived in your country a long time now, and there's that attitude, what to do, right? Somehow we've got to find a way, and touch wood, we're still being able to find a way.
Fantastic. Tim, just for the benefit of our audience, since you touched on the Express Pearl, so seafood, you've been obviously testing it when you export. Any issues you noticed there, quantities or quality or something? Yeah.
Actually, where the ship went down, not such a sensitive area for seafood. And actually during that time, there was lots of rain, lots of monsoon. So a lot of the, we're basic up in Palak Bay and Kalkatia. That's where getting the main seafood, and all the water currents come down. So that means everything's coming from the Bay of Bengal all the way down. So unfortunately, most of that plastic, a lot of that stuff would have ended up on the south coast and then in areas south of Sri Lanka. So for us, we were very diligent, made sure, but the product that we were producing, at no stage was there any risk of any type of contamination.
Glad to hear. You're touching about situations in Sri Lanka and pulling through. The question my team used to ask me, what's our strategy around this? And I used to say, it's a ball by ball match. We're going to keep deciding depending on the delivery every month. It's very dynamic strategies.
Absolutely. We used to say, you come in the morning, you have no idea what's going to happen by the evening. Come in open and be flexible. One of the things we talk to our management about is being nimble, flexible, really good communication to our customers, and most importantly, communication to our workers. It's not just our direct workers. We've got thousands and thousands of fishermen, so we just couldn't stop. And as similar to the doctor, we had the mindset right from the beginning, somehow we'll find a way. And we repurposed, we retrained. We did a lot of things that we thought would take 2 or 3 years to do, and we had to do it within 2 or 3 months out of a pure necessity. And again, out of a really tragic situation, we might look back on this in a couple of years and say, well, we might not be where we are today because of the pressure and what we had to do to keep going, what we had to do to be able to purchase, process, and sell. So hopefully some positive to come out of it.
Definitely. I'm moving on to you, Dilhan. Dilhan, tea is the biggest agricultural export out of Sri Lanka, and Dilma tea being a top exporter. As tea is a labor-intensive industry, we have 18 months. How's that affected your maintaining productivity due to the lockdowns and bringing people onto estates? What are the key challenges, and how did you manage to overcome them from the tea supply point of view?
Well, the chief difficulty or complication was in supporting our people, because ultimately, it's people, whether at plantation level or at packing factory level, it is the people that keep the industry going. We didn't have too many challenges where the plantations were concerned, because there is a sort of a natural social distancing happening. We had to, of course, implement certain measures with the washing, the supporting the quarantine teams and so on, because that was exactly as you said. You come in the morning and you suddenly find, okay, this estate is locked down or whatever it was. But I think that was part of what a lot of people did. We decided, look, we protect our people. We do not go for job loss, or we do not go for any sort of scaling down in spite of the tragedy. So that was an easy one. And connected to that was the aspect of motivating people to achieve exactly what Mahesha was saying. We needed to motivate people to make sure that they would be agile, nimble, and that they would be responsive to the change. And ultimately, this whole crisis, managing it, was about the people. It was about the food technology teams. It was about the HR teams. It's about how people reacted, because it was not anything that, as you said, it was nothing that you could strategize your way out of. So people on the plantations and factories, packing factories was an issue, but then supply chain was another issue. And that involved, again, not taking the stick to the suppliers, but saying, look, guys, how can we help you? Can we talk to the police? Can we see how we can get your factory open? How can we get your paper supplies in, etc.? And then beyond that was the next challenge in managing this disruption was actually the communication with our customers, with our consumers, because for us, as a consumer-facing organization, we have, I guess, out of in a typical year, 200 days where we are at some point in front of a customer somewhere. So we moved our School of Tea virtual. We realigned our business units so that hospitality started looking at e-commerce, restructuring to adapt to the new reality. But I guess if you look at it in priority, I guess the final challenge was logistics, and it's something that we are facing at the moment. But again, it's a question of the individual's capability. We have a shipping team that did a great job finding the containers, finding the rates, and getting a stock out. Overall, I would say that there was a reprioritization. We had to say, okay, look, hospitality is down, but sending people home or cutting their salaries is not an option, simply because the philosophy of our business. But taking it to the next stage was just taking each task and looking at how we would realign them to be useful in this current environment. And the results were fantastic. And I think as you said, Tim, we will probably look back at this time and say, look, wow, we really excelled in terms of what we achieved, because I would never have imagined that you take somebody from one environment, put them into another, and they not only survive, but they do brilliantly. But I think one of the key things that it has taught us is also the role of business. And on this, I'm happy, because our business was founded on a philosophy of serving humanity. But one thing we have realized in very stark, with great clarity, is the fact that a business has an obligation to support not only its supply chain, but also to make sure that the wider community, whether it is through the health challenges, through the socioeconomic challenges, because we realize, I think we all realize, that we are not isolated, and we cannot isolate ourselves, because the interrelationship between the social welfare of our staff, their families, their personal motivation, the whole environment, I think that really came home. And I'm hoping that as we all plan to emerge stronger and better, that is something that stays embedded, that we take in our decision making, not only the employees, that their families, their environment, their communities, their natural environment. And that would be a change for the better if we can continue that.
Thanks, Lon. Definitely. Dr. Mash, you have something to add?
No, that's fine. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I would like to remind the audience, if there's any questions you can post, please go on the chat down there. There's a Q&A forum. You can post some questions, and if there's time, I will certainly bring it up. Moving on to our next round, round 3 of questions. I will start with Tim. Tim, Sri Lanka's aquaculture exports, both farmed and wild catch, was approx $215 million in 2020. That's from the data that I was shared. Whilst Vietnam, which exported $5.5 billion that same year, massive gaps in export size. It just shows the demand potential. Just in your view, can Sri Lankan exports ever reach, that levels? Do we have the potential? What do you think the path will be if you have to scale this industry to something that's in the $1 billion range?
Yeah, look, I think as a country, firstly, we've been really slow to develop into sustainable and eco-friendly aquaculture, which is what it is. And there's been a lot of money invested in the last 20 years and in countries in the region. And I think Sri Lanka just missed out on it. Again, I took a little bit of misinformation. It's like we talk about a car, we talk about shrimp farming. People think it's what we did in the 1970s, but a car for a Tesla, it's 2021. It's different. And the same thing with shrimp farming. Because there's some bad history, it doesn't mean that what's available now is not a good opportunity. And certainly aquaculture and shrimp farming and benamai is a really good option. We saw the success when this particular species was introduced into India, and the type of performance we've seen from 220 to 221 is quite extraordinary. I think Sri Lankan seafood exports will exceed 300 million this year. And I don't like comparing 220 because it's, the hard numbers, but we'll exceed 219. So that in itself is very good. We believe that the seafood sector can, within 5 years, if we continue to develop sustainable and eco-friendly shrimp farming, we could get to a $1 billion industry. It's going to take a little bit of effort, but I don't like to get too involved with the politics and things, but there's the Honourable State Minister for Fisheries. He's doing a great job and being able to. One of the good things again with the COVID is there's some collaboration between out of being essential. You've got the private sector and the government coming together. We've got to drive. We've got to get more exports. We've got to get more dollars into the country. And I felt for the first time in many years some collaboration there, and that's a really good thing. The other one, which is something that I think the country doesn't quite pay enough attention to, and that's Tamil Nadu trawlers coming into Sri Lankan waters. There was a study done about several years ago, and they think about $900 million worth of seafood is taken out of Sri Lankan waters every year. There's a misconception that this is some dispute between fishing communities in the northern province. It's not that. The Tamil Nadu trawlers are highly mechanized boats, and they're absolutely destructive to the bottom. A Tamil Nadu trawler is twice the size of a Sri Lankan Navy boat. And when they come in to Sri Lanka, our fishermen are limited to 3 or 4 days of fishing per week instead of being able to fish 6 to 7 days per week. So I think if any young listeners are out there, if you want to get involved, you don't have to stand out the front of the Shangri-La with a placard. Get online, go out, send email letters to the Indian consulate. You can speak to the EU. This is not just a bilateral issue. What the Tamil Nadu trawlers are doing, it's called IUU fishing. They're going in, they're taking product from another origin and then selling it as product of India. So it's fraud. And you've got consumers in the EU, consumers in the US buying product of India, which would have originated from Sri Lanka. So we've been on this for about 10 years and we've been able to have some impact. But I'd kind of love to see Sri Lankan media, international media. I'd love Sri Lankan, especially in Colombo, to pay some more attention to this. It's like there's someone's coming into your house, coming into your kitchen, taking all your food, and then they're just walking out and leaving the fridge open because they've destroyed the resource, leaving the door open, and you're not saying anything about it. So I hope that we can continue the pressure. If we can stop these trawlers coming in, we would drive eco-recommended shrimp farming and then also increase the amount of wild-caught seafood. So, they're the 2 ways that we can drive the country's exports forward.
Thanks, Tim. There's always a nice, nuggets of information that come out from these webinars, and I'm certainly going to stick on to that. $900 million is a substantial. It's 3 times our exports as of now. And what you said was, it's not just taking the 900, the seafood. It's the damage caused to the whole ecosystem, which probably is worth. It's going to cost a couple of $1 billion every day, right? It's just continual damage. So. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure even as a chamber, we'll put that into one of our conversational pieces. Dylan, over to you. The tea export earnings for the first 2 quarters of 2021 were 13% higher. Have grown by 13% as per the CABSL performance report. It shows that the industry is obviously having increased revenues at least the first 2 quarters, which is a good performance. With the logistic prices being up. Do you believe that Sri Lankan tea can sustain this momentum with the current fertilizer ban concerns, and how will you as a business navigate these effects?
Sri Lankan tea, I think, has the greatest opportunity that it's ever had because of a combination of factors, least of all increase in consumer demand, greater sensitivity to safety, traceability, etc. But there are certain laws in nature. And whilst the objective of taking the country to a more sustainable agricultural basis is an incredibly noble one, there are laws of nature that prevent it from being done overnight. And so quite simply, you need time because soils need to adapt. You can't take soils that have been exploited for 150 years and suddenly say, look, we're going organic, because the soils can't sustain the growth and the kind of quality that the leaves need to produce. And so the soils need to be adapted. There needs to be a change management process. So we're going to have a lot of challenges. So far, it has been, the impact has been muted, but what is expected is that by mid next year, with the level of impact at nursery, in terms of the plant nurseries, we're probably going to see the impact happening in the early part of next year. But I believe that by then, sanity will prevail and there'll be a selective change because, quite honestly, the writing is on the wall and every scientist, local and foreign, understands the implications. It was an issue in Bhutan, it's been an issue in Sikkim. It was recently voted out by Switzerland. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done, but whatever is happening, it must be done in a phased and practical way where the infrastructure, the adaptation of the soils and the mindset of the farmers is changed to be able to accommodate that objective.
It's a scary thought, Dylan. Any thoughts on how a company can circumnavigate something like this?
Well, I think it's a tough call, but unfortunately, we have seen a few companies that have changed sources of supply, which is tragic. We are a business that is married to Ceylon tea and to our industry because we are a product of that industry. And so for us, we're looking at premiumization, we're looking at different aspects of the specialty segment. But at a national level, fortunately for us as business, we are relatively, we maintain very high export FOBs because we focus on branded value-added premium product. But the impact will be at a mass level where you could see significant impact on bulk tea exporters, people who are focusing on private label, etc. We are in a relatively more comfortable position, but that doesn't mean that we take it easy because it's about the industry and it's about the social and economic consequences for the plantations, without which we cannot survive.
Thank you. Thank you, Dylan. Dr. Mahesh, over to you. The supply chain for the solid tire industry depends a lot on the raw material rubber supply. The local rubber supply or the estates find it hard to cope with labor shortages and other factors. I believe even productivity is stagnated, product output. We are seeing a large number of FDI into the tire manufacturing segment. I believe there are large Chinese and regional expansion investment taking place. GRI itself has been expanding aggressively. How much risk does this place on your supply chain since the sources are obviously finding it difficult? And what steps are you taking to mitigate the same?
Yes, obviously, the natural rubber is a very important production input, a key raw material in the tire industry. If we look at the natural rubber production in Sri Lanka, it's been on a decline. In 2012, the country produced about 150,000 metric tons of rubber from its plantations, smallholder and plantation companies. This number has come down by 2020, last year, to just about half, about 78,000 metric tons. So on the one hand, you find that the demand increases because there are investments in the industry, new companies coming for tire manufacturing and so on. From a raw material supply point of view, you are having a challenge because the supply base is declining.
Yeah.
The requirement in the country for raw rubber for various industries, consumption is about 112,000 metric tons per year at the moment. So you can see the production is lower than the requirement, which means the gap has to be met by imports. So we are a net importer. Now this places a significant risk on your supply chain because there's a lot of competition for the small amount of rubber that is available. Like we said before, I mean, as a company, we had looked at prior to the pandemic coming in, how do we manage this supply chain and what is our duty in the social leadership area? So we had actually coined a concept around how we can make an end-to-end integrated supply chain where the rubber farmer produces the rubber for tires that we manufacture, particularly for agriculture. And these tires in turn go to another group of farmers worldwide who are using them for their productivity to deal with their crop farming. And they feed the world, including these farmers. So we found this as a concept we can launch into a game-changing project, a social leadership program. We called it ourselves the Green X Circle because we got the farmers on one hand, we making the tires, supplying that to the farmers who use it for agriculture, and then try to see how we can connect these two communities through a social leadership program, which we call this Green X Circle. So we had already launched this program to with the farmers in Sri Lanka, creating a farmer base, rather than treating farmer just as a supplier of a raw material. So this became an integrated chain, end to end. And the farmers are part of, therefore, our integrated supply chain. This social leadership program meant that these farmers who are joining the program are going to be looked after in multiple terms, making sure that they get the training, making sure their plots are sustainably managed, harvesting is done in a sustainable manner, there is no child labor employed by them, and a number of similar areas where we want to make sure that this integrated supply chain is managed very well. And then we are taking the same concept to the world, to the other farmers, that here, look here, your counterpart farmers on the one side is the ones who are actually supplying this rubber to you to make these tires, and that is going to help you. So now, since we were able to launch this initiative well ahead of the pandemic, we had already embarked on building the farmer base as a reliable supply base for us. And it was also a two-way street. It was a reliability for the farmer because we were there when they need us, and we would be having a mutual partnership. So when the pandemic hit and when the potential disturbance to the local supply chain were coming through, we had this risk, but we were able to fast track more of our Green X Circle initiative to get and help these farmers who are otherwise going into a little bit of problems whom to supply, because there was price competition and all that kind of thing. Some would take the product. Some, if their factories were not operative, then that would be a risk to the supply. But we didn't do that. We continued to make sure that their produce is taken and their livelihood is secure. So that actually improved the reliability of our concept to enable more farmers to join this base, and to a large extent mitigate, as a result, the potential risks that would have otherwise arisen. So it's once again that social leadership program that we launched well ahead of not even anticipating this kind of a problem, that was right on time, in the right place, that helped us to pivot and build on it. So in other words, we were also able to mitigate that local supply risk.
Thank you, Dr. Marcel. Moving on to the question on the supply side, do you feel that moving forward there is, is there any way that Sri Lankan government or as a nation we can look at increasing our rubber supply? Because obviously, some of these factories are only coming online in the next 1 year, if I'm correct. There's a supply glut of the raw rubber. Do you see any solution to that for the industry?
Yeah, I think the governments have tried various ways to increase the natural rubber production. There is a rubber master plan. There were goals to make the rubber-based export industry $5 billion, $2 billion industry in a certain time period. So all the potential is there. That's why even the investors are coming here. So it is actually a good thing if the governments and the private sector can join together to increase the level of production that locally is available with whatever the land plots, so that supply directly caters to the value addition to the local economy. In general, the tire industry adds about 50%, 50 to 60% value to the local economy. So that's quite good. And by broad basing the rubber supply, the plantations and the rubber yield, looking at how to also get better yield through plants by managing the productivity, there is ample potential for us to cater to this industry that can become a vital sector. Right now it's the number 3 sector after tea, but it could easily get to a better position with all this infrastructure support.
Thank you, sir. So if I may summarize for any of our viewers, it's also there's obviously a potential, a lot of demand coming in for raw rubber, and obviously getting into the high yielding estates, or even using maybe genetic engineering and other technology to get better yield per acre will be, obviously there's going to be a demand for that, and Sri Lanka does have a supply gap. So thank you for sharing that, Doctor. Moving on to our next question round, where we better want to understand corporate culture, ESG, and social leadership of each of these large companies. Let's start with Dilma Tea. Dilhan, we know that Dilma is a family-run business which takes social responsibility very seriously. As such, the business relies on enduring connection with the land and the communities in which you operate. I've taken this off your sustainability report. Can you explain this further, and how this culture and leadership has helped Dilma as a brand?
It's been our greatest strength because it gives remarkable clarity, whether in terms of managing the people, whether in terms of supporting the community. If there's a shortage of beds in certain area, you build the facilities. If there is any issue in a plantation, you don't compromise, you don't externalize any of the aspects that would typically could be externalized as part of the temptation to cut costs, particularly in crisis. So it gives clarity to the business. And I think established as a business, a family business on family values, my father gave us amazing clarity, because he also explained to us at every point that success is not something that is either earned or an entitlement, and therefore it is a blessing, and that blessing comes with the obligation of sharing it. So, with that also comes a very clear humility, saying, look, whatever we achieve, it's not my doing, it's a blessing that we have received from God, and therefore I think, you also have the ability to unlearn, to adapt, to look at situations differently, because you're always on watch. You have to do what is right because it is right, not because it is expedient or because it is cost efficient. And yeah, I would say that in this crisis, it has been our greatest strength, because, you don't have the option of doing what might be less costly or what might be, more commercially efficient according to Friedman's theory.
Thank you. Moving on to Dr. Mahesha, GRI is one of the largest privately owned organizations in Sri Lanka. Businesses refer to a lot to a bottom line. About 3 years ago, we started using quadruple bottom line, which is profit, people, planet, and purpose. How does your organization measure success outside just the profit bottom line, Doctor?
Yeah, I mean, for us, sustainability is integrated into everything we do. Our vision is to move humanity towards making a positive impact on the planet. That's our vision. Our mission is to make specialty tires sustainably. Our brand personality is, in a single word, we call green. So from the vision to everything we do, sustainability side is integrated. So it's embedded in everything that we do. And when it comes to how we measure success on the areas beyond profitability or profit equation, there are a few things we do. Number one, we have our R&D continuously deployed in innovating greener products, more eco-friendly products. You may have seen in the news recently, we very recently launched the world's most eco-friendly solid tire, which replaced a lot of material, and we got the 43% of that material that's going into the tire, all in terms of sustainable material. So the R&D teams are continuously working to make innovative products that contribute to our vision and our brand personality, which is about sustainable products, eco-friendly products. So that's on the product side. We talked about how we have given social leadership in creating an end-to-end integrated supply chain from the farmer to the farmer who uses the tires, which we call the Green X Circle. So that's another big foundation we are laying with the future mind. Thirdly, we are also launching, and we're already in that program globally with our customer base, connecting with our customers in the theme, under the theme, greening our planet. So we are launching projects worldwide with our customers, and the customers are joining with us in these projects in their own markets to launch greening of our planet theme projects. Basically, these are focused on tree planting, and we are doing this in Sri Lanka as well. So that's the third area. The fourth area is, as a company, we contribute towards through our programs to the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. More specifically, our scope of activities connect with quality education as a goal, climate action, the life on land, responsible consumption and production, and clean energy. So we play into these 5 areas of the UN sustainability goals, and our projects are incorporating and supporting these goals as well, because we are a global player, and it's important for us to show the connectedness not only in the products and the other internal initiatives, but also as a global citizen, how we can contribute to these areas. So that is how we measure success in our activities far beyond the bottom line equation.
Thank you, Dr. Mahesha. Tim, I'm going to change gears with you a bit in terms of the question on sustainability. You recently said that the new seafood watch rating will have significant impact on Sri Lankan seafood. You stated, It means we will have access to new markets, which will enable our fishermen to get better prices. It will also stabilize our supply chain, which will enable our workers to earn more income. Could you explain to the audience on what are FIPs and how they will help improve sustainable aquaculture, especially touching on this the blue swimming crab, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, certainly. Look, before I talk on that, the beginning is all about social responsibility. And when we first came into Northern Province, one of the things we looked at is, obviously marginalised, communities. How are we going to protect their livelihoods? And one of the things that we realised right from the outset is that we have to make the fishery sustainable, not just sustainable for us to get premium prices, but sustainable so future generations can benefit from this unique resource. What we managed to do, we started the FIP, which is called a Fishery Improvement Project. We started it back in 2013. And part of that was also taking on the Tamil Nadu trawlers. That was a part of, that's when we started that campaign. It's because the Northern Province is data poor. There was no scientific studies because of the conflict. We had to start from zero. But in 2018, we became the first fisheries in Sri Lanka to be eco-recommended, and we became the only blue swimming crab fishery anywhere in Asia or Southeast Asia to be eco-recommended. So when we talk about eco-recommended, that means MSC or Seafood Watch. Seafood Watch is a US standard. It's serious science. It's not like you can just tick boxes. They come here, and we have a fishery scientist, a gentleman, Dr. Steve Creech, who's been working on the FIP since 2013. I think we've invested close to $450,000 in the FIP since 2013. A lot of that is by customers in the US, by NGOs. We had a lot of support by the ILO and the UN, because the same concept was, if we protect the fishery, we protect the livelihoods of the fishermen, and then because we get the crab, we protect the income of the females that are working in the fishing communities. So it's all interlocked, and our drive to get the fishery sustainable was to protect the communities. And we're really lucky we're there. And there's two things I wanted to show you. I want to show this for Dilham. Can you see that? I'm drinking my Dilmar tea, supporting. And the second one is that we're the only company anywhere in Asia and Southeast Asia that's packing, I don't know if you can see that, for Whole Foods. So we pack under their private label. Whole Foods is a US retailer. It's considered to be the gold standard. You cannot sell any product in their shops unless you're being certified as sustainable and socially compliant. So we're really proud of this fact. It's a good reflection for Sri Lanka, good reflection for Sri Lankan seafood. It got a lot of international attention. It didn't get as much attention in Sri Lanka, but hopefully after tonight, maybe people will have a look at that. But, it was an amazing an accomplishment. And again, the driving force behind it was, how do we protect the fishing communities? And by getting a premium price, encouraging them to fish sustainably and responsibly, again, we can make sure the resource is there for future generations.
Thank you, Tim. This was quite an interesting article, and really, really interesting to hear that we are one of the very few countries in Southeast Asia, if I'm not mistaken, right? We have the certification.
Yeah, we're the only country in Asia. Asia. There's one fishery in Australia. If you go to Whole Foods, there's only Sri Lankan blue swimming crab, and there's some US crab. It's quite I don't like to tell too many people. It's obviously good for our business that we have this market. But again, it's a good reflection of what you can achieve in Sri Lanka when there's collaboration, when you've got fishing communities working together with the private sector, and you have good governance by the government. Sometimes we want the government to set the rails and let the private sector and the communities go to work, and then we can achieve things like this.
Fantastic. We are 6 minutes over, so I've got to rush the last bit because we try to stick to time. I'm going to end by bringing up a common question for all three speakers, but I'll try and break it out. These are trying times. The news is constantly negative. Exchange control, forex issues, threats on GSP plus, COVID-19. It's ongoing. It's a hard time to be a young corporate leader or a business owner right now, a small SME business owner particularly. So my question to each of you is, each of you have faced your own challenges in early parts of your career and businesses. What can you share for those feeling very negative and overwhelmed right now? Maybe Dilan, over to you. What can you share to really maybe spread some cheer?
I can't claim to understand the situation of each person, but I would say something that holds me in good stead is attitude. Your attitude, quoting someone else, determines your altitude. But also remember that it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor is it the smartest, it is the most adaptable. And so taking a fresh attitude, looking at the situation with an attitude of overcoming will ultimately help us to be adaptable. So there is a way, but there's got to be a will.
I like that. Thank you. Dr. Mahesa?
Yes, I would say in a single word, stay focused, or 2 words, stay focused, and focused on what is important. So you need to be focused on which markets you want to operate, which means you also need to say no to everything else. Inside the market, you need to select which segment you're going to serve, and then be bold enough to say no to everything else. And once you select that segment to operate, you need to create a lot of customer intimacy to understand the needs of the customers and identify 1 or 2 things that you can do better than anybody else. And the 4th thing is flawlessly do that.
Thank you. Tim, anything you want to quickly add?
Yeah, just quickly, I look again, I think the COVID crisis has affected everyone a little bit differently, but yeah, I have a lot of faith in Sri Lankans, the entrepreneurial spirit, the business-minded, they're going to look for opportunities. At the moment, sometimes your situation, you might not be able to do much about it. So my advice is be kind to yourself, make sure you look after your family and friends, and things will get better. So stay optimistic, stay positive. I'm sure things will improve for everyone shortly.
Definitely. Thank you. And with that, we come to the end of this insightful webinar and meeting with 3 industry leaders. The advice and insight shared will definitely help us as a nation, as industrials, and even as single business owners to focus on making a better and stronger tomorrow. I want to thank the panelists for the time and heart to share. Thank you for joining us tonight. Good night and God bless. Over to you, Rai, to formally close the sessions.
Thank you, Prasanta. Well, that brings us to the end of the 4th episode of the Be Inspired series, and on the subject of pandemic resilient corporate success. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I know I'm inspired by you, especially by those golden nuggets that you just shared at the end. And of course, I know that all our participants on Zoom, as well as our viewers on YouTube and Facebook, are as well. The AmCham Sri Lanka Be Inspired series is supported by LMD and the Daily FT. And as always, a reminder to subscribe, click the alert button, and of course, share the YouTube video, which is what will assist us to continue bringing AmCham's diverse and impactful online resources to you free of charge. As we conclude, our usual reminder from all of our panelists, the AmCham team, and myself, let's keep our physical distance, masks on, hand sanitized, immunity boosted, fingers crossed, and spirits up. Stay safe, everyone. Good night.